start of the service. We were told it was 2 o'clock, but I think it's 2:30.
Please be seated. A warm welcome to this very special celebration of a beloved man and a fond farewell to someone with whom we all have close regard and much valued memories. He was a close friend and a part of many families. Recently, I understand he was tracing his roots and reconnected with some of his Jewish family who are here with us today. He was also part of other families, the Davin family, the Hodgkins and Braggs, and many more, I'm sure. I understand especially in Angola and Mozambique, where he passionately worked for the independence movement. But he made real friendships there, sense of family with people there. He lived in Congo for 4 years, surrounded by a community that inevitably loved him, and that he inevitably loved, being such a generous man that he was. And his last 2 years also having a home, moving to Ghana. And he couldn't really talk about Ghana without having a sense of delight. The people around him, the neighbours, and sometimes talking about how if they cooked a goat, they could bring him some of the food. He was a man who people just warmed to naturally. He had an infectious smile and knew somehow the delight in life. There was nothing like sitting with him with a glass of something delicious in his hand and him relishing some kind of conversation. So today, celebrate and give thanks for him and say a very fond farewell. We have some of his favourite music. And the piece at the end of this service was chosen by him, I understand, in one late evening conversation, was chosen by him as something that he would want at his funeral. And we have some very good friends and family who are going to say a few words. We begin today with Anna Davin.
I hope everybody can hear me. I sometimes have a problem when the microphone is the wrong height, but today it's perfect. I'm speaking partly for my sisters Delia and Bridget. Bridget is here, Delia can't be. We knew Michael in Oxford during his first year as an undergraduate at Wadham College, which was 1959 to 60. Through other Wadham students who, like my sisters, were involved in the campaign against nuclear weapons. Bill Jenner, for instance, Martin Rosendahl, then Andrew Sanford Smith, faces to be found amongst us here now. Politics led to closer developments. Delia and Bill married in 1961, Bridget and Andy in 1963, when Michael was their best man. In Michael's last student year, 61 to 62, he'd become a regular visitor to our parents' house. So this was a relationship which quickly began to transcend generations as it was going to go on doing. I'd already left at that point when Luke Hodgkin, also here, and I married in December 1959. But Luke and I met Michael only in October 62. He was nevertheless to be a lifelong friend. Michael later wrote movingly about these years for a collection of memoirs of my father in 2000. He placed them in the context of his earlier life. His father had died when he was a few weeks old, and he had grown up, he wrote, mostly away from his mother, from babyhood, through private and boarding schools. Families at best, he wrote, intrigued me and generally made me confused. I learned much from books, but little from life, he said. Olivia Carton, he reminded me of his story of the first time he ever went to the library and his delight in this cornucopia of joys to come. He was 7 or 8. He took out the maximum number of books, 4, that morning, came back in the afternoon to change them, to be met with an incredulous librarian who refused to change them, saying he couldn't possibly have read them already. And he said, "Test me!" And she wouldn't. He pleaded. Olivia wrote about this, the brilliant, passionate, small boy's sense of bewilderment and injustice resonates since. And I think there was always something of that. He sought for the best, not just for himself. In Oxford, he found both a community of friends and also surrogate family, his own term. First with ours, the Davins, then also with Luke's family, the Hodgkins, whom he came to know in 1966. He wrote in 2000, "For nearly 4 decades I have sometimes identified as a Davin and sometimes as a Hodgkin." And of course he went on to write the biography of Thomas Hodgkin. With his intelligence, his love of talk and people, and his endless curiosity, he was welcome company at our family gatherings, whether in house or pub. His amazing memory was also appreciated, and continued to be. In later years, we often checked with him about past events. It was like having somebody who was the historian of our lives, as well as the context of many of our friends and networks. He would always remember dates, who had met whom when, how, as it happened, he had been instrumental when our half-sister Patty met her husband-to-be, and there were just many little things like that he never forgot. We constantly did. I sometimes wonder whether it was to do with the fact that he was more abstemious than we. He was conscious of fulfilling the role of historical witness. This was a role once ascribed to him by my father, who Michael remembered very strongly and wrote about this, how my father looked at him on some occasion and said, "You are a witness." I think that he was a witness not only in the context of family and friends, but also in his work. His translations of the speeches and writings of prominent Africans like Amilcar Cabral, Simona Machel and Agustin Neto are not just translations, they're about bearing witness too, as well as bringing African politics and culture to an English-speaking audience. And I believe he was a great missionary for Africa in Britain, if you like, a nice bringing the Empire Strikes Back kind of role. He brought Africa into this event. His years of work on the biography of Thomas Hodgkin stemmed again from a sense of the past and the present and its importance to the future and the importance of noticing, of observing, of witnessing. After he returned from a number of years in Africa, I think it's around 1990, but I'd appreciate it if someone could be more precise. He settled back into his house, his London house in Waterloo near the station. And at this time, I didn't live far away, and we were both involved in an oral history group, which met regularly at the Waterloo Action Centre. And through that, he did extensive recordings with an 80-year-old ex-miner called Stan Rothwell. And I hope it might be possible, actually, to retrieve those and make something out of them as a memorial to that side of him, which he loved to talk about. And around then, also on his return to London, he became a student again. He obtained an MSc, I suppose that's a Master's of Science degree, in Intelligent Management Systems. And in 1991, his cousin Kate Gifford and I attended the award ceremony in Southwark Cathedral. I saw this as characteristic of Michael's intellectual curiosity, his urge to follow new paths, his readiness to, if he was interested in something, to not just to dabble in it, but to go much deeper. Others today will speak about Michael's many roles of many many kinds, and nobody should try to do all of them, so I'm not. I want to mention briefly his commitment to public service of various kinds, which might be less familiar to people. It underlay his time as a public service broadcaster in Angola. It was a factor in his 20-odd years at work as an election monitor. He used to go internationally to elections in different countries and be an observer, trying to make sure that everything was being carried out in a proper democratic way. He did this for the European Union, the Organisation of Security and Cooperation in Europe, and the Carter Centre, scrutinising polls in countries such as Rwanda, Bosnia, Madagascar, and Togo, and many others. His commitment to public service was also expressed in his own London neighbourhood, where he served as the director of the Waterloo Community Regeneration Trust, the Waterloo Action Centre, the Association of Waterloo Groups, and the Waterloo Community Coalition, and was also a regular at meetings of Waterloo Community Development Group. So it's not, his public service is also coming from the left and in the interests of community activism. And he was also a school governor for many years. Again, I can't quite remember where, but perhaps someone can remind me. Michael liked to say that he had acquired his basic values not through school or family, but through one book, Patsy Podger Plays the Game. I don't know, does anyone else remember me saying that? We've obtained a copy. It was published in 1943 by Harrop, and was the work of a 15-year-old girl called Jennifer Ford, who did both illustrations and text. And she was clearly a brownie, a member of the Junior Girl Guides. The book is about Patsy, who was herself a new member of the Brownies. Her group are expected to live up to Brownie standards, but these are not explained. Next week, she tells her younger brothers they have mysteriously to play the game and then report to Brown Owl. Brown Owl, in case anyone isn't aware, is the authority figure in the Brownie pack. In my case, she was a teacher, and I was always baffled by how Miss Wilton suddenly transmogrified into each day, the three children, Patsy and her brothers, do things together, but still, Patsy hadn't played the game. She clearly wasn't quite sure how to or what. Thursday was the last chance. They went to the deep, peaceful woods and encountered a fat green frog looking cross and miserable near a pond full of lively little frogs teasing him because he wouldn't play. Finding that the frog had a birthday present ball which he was reluctant to get wet, Patsy convinced him to throw it in for everyone. You are spoiling the game for the others, and you'll be so much happier if you all play together. The shouts and splashes which followed were tremendous in capital letters. At the Brownies meeting next day, Patsy thinks she's a failure. I'm sorry, but I didn't do anything. Brown Owl, who had been briefed the previous evening by Patsy's mother over a cup of cocoa, says that on the contrary she has played the game in the very bravest kind of way. You met someone who was very sad, sitting by a pond, and you taught him how to play the game, which was every bit as good as doing it yourself. You are the best brownie in the pack. So, as I read this little bit of ephemera, really, I was looking, so what were these values that Michael was looking for? It was just at the end there that I felt it was getting people to enjoy life together, being kind, being supportive, seeing what the problem might be and finding a resolution. Those were all things Michael was very good at. I dare say he would have been anywhere. I'm not sure that we can attribute it entirely to Patsy Podger. But there's also no doubt that Michael did indeed discover that there was no point in being miserable on your own. He was not a sunker. Since Michael's death, there have been many messages of sympathy exchanged. One of mine was from my old friend Dale Tomich at the University of Binghamton in New York, who had quite recently, through me, arranged for Michael to embark on his last big translation of the history of Angola by Luis Felipe Allen Castro. And Dale wrote, I corresponded with Michael a lot over the last several months, and like Luis Felipe, I felt a great deal of affection for him, and we had developed a very good relationship. Those things don't really happen for me on email. He's of my generation. So Dale said, wouldn't be normal, but it must say something about Michael that it happened. And I think it's wonderful that just in that through work in those last months, Michael yet again made a new friend, and one who felt so warmly about him, even without having met him. And Luis Felipe, whose book he was translating, wrote with similar sadness. He'd been planning to come to London and meet Michael in person and say how much he appreciated the work that he was doing on the translation, how wonderfully he was doing it, and also how he appreciated that the reason Michael was doing it was his passion for the history of Angola and his wish to transmit it. So, like everybody here, the people I've mentioned, the people I haven't mentioned, people here, the people who can't be here, we'll all miss Michael's generous love of company and his capacity to entertain, to enable, and to remember. And we'll remember him.
Hello, I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm actually Anna's son, so slightly to that family theme, but I'm going off on a fairly different theme. So obviously, you know, from what Anna said about the families, David's and Hodgkins, as I'm both, I've known Michael all my life, let's say he, me, my siblings and cousins, since we were babies, and we'd often sort of love to remind us of that. And he was a great friend, a great family friend on both sides, a constant presence at all family occasions. He was always warm, enthusiastic, very talkative, loved to talk about, you know, what he was doing, what I was doing as I became a journalist, involved in international news, so that was always, you know, there was always a lot of things to talk about there. And he came to stay with me and my family in Brussels when we were there in the late 90s, 1998 I think, when he was researching his own family links there. I was there working for Reuters. But we also had one particular shared interest, which is what I'm going to talk about here, which was cryptic crosswords. Shared in fact with quite a lot of other family members and friends I think, but Michael was very good at them and was passionate. Long-time aficionado of the Times and Guardian puzzles particularly, and he was very encouraging when I started out compiling myself in 2007 for The Independent. I realised for a lot of people this subject, cryptic